Hello, today I'm going to show you how to stitch up the knitting to make these super cool Christmas ornaments that are mugs. You can see this blue one here represents hot cocoa with some marshmallows on top. This one here in red just represents a cup of coffee. Okay, and they have the little hangers that you can hang from the tree. Today I am going to make a third one and I'll walk you through the steps of stitching it up and assembling it. Only this time I am going to try and make it a teacup, which is not one that I have done before. Now your materials for this project are going to vary depending on what type of beverage you want inside your cup. So regardless of what beverage you want, all of the projects are going to require some scrap yarn in any color. It doesn't take a whole lot for you to include. You will need a small piece of cardboard. I've taken some that was just the back of a pasta box that was in my recycle. You're just going to put that at the bottom to kind of give your mug a little bit of a flat bottom. You will need some felt in whatever color it is for the beverage that you're drinking. This one here I have today is a little bit more of like a burnt orange brown, whereas these here represent more of the dark brown for the coffee or hot cocoa. The other thing you will need, which I don't have with me right now at this moment, is your stuffing or your fiber fill, which you will need to put inside. Another thing you will need is some hot glue and some glue sticks. That is what we will use to attach the felt on. And then depending on what you're using, if you choose to do marshmallows, you might need it for that. For this particular one, I use small little beads, which you can see. This was the first one that I made, and if I were to do it again, I would not do beads. When I make these mugs with the kids, a lot of times I use the small little white pom-poms and we just glue the pom-poms on. I find that to be just as effective, works just as well, and is a little bit quicker to work with. So that is something extra that you would need if you are doing the hot cocoa version. If you are going to do the tea version, you will probably need a small piece of cardstock to make the tag, as well as a little bit of DMC floss. I don't have those items out with me right now, but when we get to that point, I can show those to you. The pattern that I used to make these mugs was from Yarnspirations. I will post the link in the description down below. For my students, I chose to modify the pattern. The Yarnspirations pattern had you make it from the bottom going up, and that was just a little more challenging for my students, so I modified it so that we worked from top down. The skills were just a little bit easier for my students to do. However, it will be fairly similar in terms of how you do it. Obviously, since I switched the direction, when I finish, I am working down here at the bottom, whereas you guys would be up at the top. Those are some slight changes. So let's go ahead and let's get started turning a yellow one that I used this yellow yarn for into a teacup. So I have finished the knitting on my mug, and this is what it will kind of look like if you do the modified version that I had, where I started at the top and worked my way down to the bottom. You'll see your mug will have these two decorative rows in the middle of it, and then you should also have a separate piece that is going to be your mug handle. Okay, so those are the two pieces that you need. Once you are finished, you're not actually going to bind off these last few stitches here. Instead, we're going to use those stitches to help us create the bottom part of our mug. So I have cut my tail. I have a pretty long tail because I'll be using that to tie up the mug. I'm going to weave it in to my needle. So now what we're going to do, we're going to close up the bottom of our mug. So we need the end to be closed up so that our liquid wouldn't fall out if we were to take a drink from the mug. And so right now you can see my tail is coming out of this last stitch. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so you can see here is where my tail is. What I'm going to do with my needle, I'm going to start opposite that, and I am going to bring the needle in through these last 6 stitches to kind of bring that circle to a close. You can do this while it's on your needle, or you can take it off your needle. I find it easier to take it off of the needle and then just loop carefully without dropping any of those stitches. the tail through those 6. Get my needles out of the way here. And then you're gonna pull that up nice and tight. You'll notice that now our mug is closed. Now I'm gonna go through each stitch just one more time here for some added strength at the bottom of our project. There we go. And now we're going to use the same tail that we have here, and we're going to stitch up the side of our mug. Oops, couldn't quite see there. So now our end is closed. We're going to stitch up this side of our mug here. And a lot of this is going to be hidden with our handle. So if you look at a mug that's already done, my seam is here behind the handle. So we don't need to stress too much about how it looks because a lot of that is going to be hidden with our handle. So I'm just going to use a whip stitch here to stitch up the end. I'm going to go in one side and out the other and pull it up tight. Go in the side closest to me and out to the other. Pull it up tight. And I'm going to keep going in that same pattern. Always start on that side closest to me, going out the other side and pulling that up tight. And you can see it is bringing that mug side to a close. Almost up to that top there. I didn't keep track of how many stitches I'm doing along the way, but you want to make sure that they're fairly tight to one another so that we don't have any holes in our mug. I'm going to do one more up here at the very top. And I always like to try and end with my tails on different ends. You can see here that my stitches look pretty tight. You can't see through. So we are finished with that step. Now, I am going to tie these 2 ends. This here was my cast on edge over here, and this one here was the one I just sewed up. Excellent. So there we have our mug. Now it doesn't look much like a mug right now. It looks like a little hat, but we are still in the stages of building the mug. The next step is going to be for us to add on our handle. Now, you will have a little bit of a choice in terms of how you want your handle to look. Now, both of mine here are done the same direction, same way. So this was the mug handle that I made, and you can see that the 2 sides look a little bit different here. This one here has kind of a valley in between the 2 ridges, and this one here has the bumps kind of in the middle. I always like doing this side for my handle, but again, you can choose which side you would like to do. So I'll show you again. This one here has kind of one big ridge in the middle, whereas this side here has kind of this valley in the middle. I like to do this as the inside, and this is the outside, or this side is what we'll show. So now the next step is going to be attaching this onto our mug. Now, you'll notice that we want our mug to have a little bit of that curl look to it. So part of that is a matter of how we stitch it on and where we stitch it. So the first part is we're going to curl it down and stitch up here, and then we'll come down and stitch the bottom part. But you can see both of these mugs have that little curly cue. Kind of makes them look a little fancy. So I'm going to start up here at the top with mine, and I am going to use one of these tails that I have already because my tails are down here at the bottom. So our first step is that we're going to turn this upside down so that we can get that curl up at the top part. Okay, so I want whatever side I want visible to face downward right now while we tack this part here. So I'm going to use this part from the top, and I'm going to go in and grab one of the stitches here. Hold on, I'm getting tangled up in my tails here. And then we're going to go back to the other side. And now we're going to do some stitches to tack down this little part right here. So I can go down and into the middle of my mug. And then I can come back up through the handle and tack down on the other side here. And now you can see that that handle is tacked down right on top of that seam where I seamed my mug together, that I can fold it down right along that seam, and you'll see I'll have that top curly Q already there. Now, this piece of yarn here is now on the inside, okay? And I am finished with that one. So I'm gonna take the other one that I had up at the top. This one's a little long. I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter here. And I am gonna put it through to the inside as well. And nobody's gonna see the inside of your mug because it's all going to be stuffed. But we need to make sure that our tails here are all tacked down. So now both of these tails are inside. I can knot those off. And that way they will be secure and they will not go anywhere. Now you could cut these tails, but I'm gonna keep them, and I'm gonna use them as part of my stuffing for inside of my mug. So I'm just gonna kind of loosely put them inside for right now. So now we have the bottom part. Now I'm gonna use these tails from my cast on and bind off of the mug handle to do the attaching of the bottom of the handle. So I'm gonna line this up so that it is right along that seam. So here's that seam where I attach them together. And I'm gonna line the handle up right along there. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the top of my mug. I'm gonna insert into the inside. And then I'm gonna come back through to the front. Making sure that you catch that handle. Now I'm gonna stitch up just a little bit so that handle is nice and secured at the bottom, and then that also gives it that extra little curl. Okay, if we stitch up, and I kind of like to stitch halfway up in between these two little ridges here. So I'm gonna do just a few more stitches like that one that I just did. Again, going through the front, into the inside. And then coming back through to the front. I'm gonna do it one more time, I think. And we'll take a look and see how it looks then. Go in through the front. And then go back through to the back. And that's the look that my handle is looking on my mug. I'm happy with how that one looks. I like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this tail back into the inside one last time. And then I'm going to do the same thing with that other tail that I had. I'm just going to shove it through to the inside. I'll just go right where it was. And then I can tie these two tails together. You kind of have to turn your mug inside out to be able to see to tie your knot. And then, like I said, we can use these yarn as part of our stuffing for our mug. But before we do our stuffing, we need to get a flat bottom for our mug. So I will show that step next. So for the next part, we're going to make a small little circle for the bottom of our mug. You can always make your circle smaller, but you can't make it bigger. So I'm going to start with, oh, I don't know, about a little bit bigger than the size of a quarter. And then know that I can always cut it down if I need to make it smaller yet. And like I said, this is just thin cardboard from a pasta box that I had in my recycle. Doesn't need to be anything thick, but just something to give us that bottom. Perfect. So you can see about how big that is in terms of my hand. And then we're just going to put that at the very bottom of our mug, and we're going to see how that looks size-wise. I would say that actually fits my mug pretty well. I am going to leave it that size, and then I'm going to stuff all my yarn back on top. Now it's time for us to get out the fiber fill so we can fill the rest of it. So we're going to grab some fiber fill and just stuff it in our mug until our mug is completely full. This is where those yarn scraps really do help, because it really cuts down on the amount of filling that you need to put inside your cup. So you can see it's starting to take on that mug look. You don't want to overstuff it too much, because then it will distort the shape of your mug a little bit. So I was going to say mine needs just a little bit less here, maybe even. I think that looks pretty good for this mug here. You can see putting that cardboard in gives it that flat bottom that allows it to kind of sit up. You can see it has the flat instead of looking like the top of a hat. And so now we're ready for the next part, which is going to be adding the liquid part. So for this, again, I have some felt. It is kind of more of a tea color, which is why I'm going to try and do a little tea bag. I have a little bit of DMC floss here that I'm going to use to represent the string that the tea bag is on. But first I'm going to show you what we're going to do to get the top part here. So we're going to cut out just a small circle. It needs to be a little bit bigger than our opening here, so we have enough room to glue it down. Again, remember, you can always make your circle smaller, but you cannot make it bigger. I would say it needs to be a little bit smaller yet, otherwise we're going to have a lot of extra bulk. So I'm going to cut my circle down just a little bit here. And it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. I would say that looks like about the right proportion for inside of my mug here. Now, the next step we're going to do is we're going to attach the DMC floss to the felt, so that we can have that tag for our tea. So let me get a smaller needle here than the big one we had for the yarn. And there we go. So what I'm going to do close to the edge here, I'm going to poke my DMC floss through. And on the bottom, I am going to tie a knot. That way it doesn't go all the way through to the front. And I'm probably going to have to tie several knots just so that it is a large enough knot chunk that it doesn't go through to the front. Excellent. So now when I pull this, you can see that that's not going to go all the way through to the front. And then this will be our tea bag. So now the next part is we're going to glue this onto the inside of our mug here. So you can see I'm kind of tucking it in under the edge of that mug top. If you find you need to trim down the top a little bit more, you can do that at this time as well. Okay. So you can see there. Oops. The part keeps popping out. I might need to cut this side just a little bit shorter. So let's see what I can do here. I just take a little bit off around the whole edge here. Move my circle just a little bit so that that tea bag tie isn't right by the handle. There we go. Excellent. And now we're ready for our next part, which is going to be the hot gluing. Okay, so now we need to get the felt adhered onto the knitted mug here. So at the top rim here, you can see how the rim kind of curls in. We're gonna put the glue underneath this rim here. So I'm gonna peel back the rim a little bit, and I'm gonna put just a little bit of glue on that felt. And then I'm gonna kind of poke it in underneath the edge of that coffee cup like such. And I'm gonna keep going until I've gone all the way around my mug here. Of course, be careful not to get your fingers in that hot glue. Excellent. So you can see I went all the way around. Now this here is adhered onto the mug and won't be going anywhere. Most of our glue here is hidden, which is what we want. Now at this time, if you were to add marshmallows, if you were making hot cocoa, you could you could take those little pom-pom balls and put a little glue and then stick them on to represent the hot cocoa balls. Since I'm doing the tea with this one, I am gonna hot glue some little paper to represent the end of the tea back there. But obviously my tail is way too long here, so I'm gonna shorten up my tea bag string a little bit. And then here I have just two small little pieces of cardstock that I am gonna glue onto this piece of DMC floss. So because this is a white background, I'm gonna use my hot glue bin here to kind of show you what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna put some hot glue on one of the pieces of cardstock. I'm gonna put the tail in the middle. I'm gonna put the other piece of paper right on top and squish them together. Now my tea bag has the little end on it. So this is how you would make the mug, or how you would assemble your mug, whether you're choosing to do the tea, whether you're leaving it as hot cocoa. And again, I think the pom-poms work better than the beads personally, so I wouldn't use the beads. And then, or if you want to just keep it plain for the coffee. Now, you'll notice here that this one has a very flat top and this one here is a little more rounded. And again, that's just being cautious with your stuffing and what you are using. This here was also a little bit of a thicker piece of felt, which I think made it have that nicer top to it as well. Now we have one more thing that we need to do, and that is to add our hanger onto this one for our teacup. So again, I just took some of the string that was left over from the color that I used to make my mug. I'm gonna go through this rim here. I like that a little bit better. And then I'm gonna tie a knot in the ends. Again, don't need my hanger quite that long for my ornament. And sometimes you can pull that knot into the middle. Mine isn't wanting to go today, so I'm just going to cut my tails a little bit shorter yet. And there I have my mug with my little tea end. So again, there's lots of varieties, different colors, different types of beverages that you can put inside your coffee mug. But this would be how you assemble the mug for a Christmas ornament after you have all the knitting done. I hope you enjoy making some and try some different variety with the tea, the hot cocoa, or the just black coffee. Enjoy!